And so let's see, it's Dekai here. Dekai and I are friends, everyone. So I just wanted to share that he's also one of the most he's a brilliant AI pioneer, and we've been traveling the world, kind of talking about some of what we're doing, and also this amazing relay, where we're talking about compassion and AI, and and the future of our world and humanity. It's been such a joy getting to run into you all over the world, Takai. We just came from the UN and New York Climate Week, where we were able to, talk a bit, and I want to just share with everyone. So Takai is a AI pioneer for over 40 years, whose PhD thesis argued for statistical machine learning and natural language processing. He built the first global translator and invented groundbreaking language models that spawned Google Translate and Microsoft Translate and Yahoo and all the above. He's earned recognition as a founding fellow of natural language processing. He holds joint appointments at HKUST's Computer Science and Engineering Department and UC Berkeley's International Computer Science Institute. He also serves as independent director of the Future Society and was an inaugural member of Google's AI Ethics Council. And he is also an incredible author who recently released a book called Raising AI. So, Dekai, thank you for foregoing sleep and joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
We're thrilled. And so, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over this last year since announcing that an initiative that you've been up to.
Oh, well, I'm really excited about this because it's been a year since I announced, actually at the last year's United Nations event, the project that we were embarking on. I think I've just shared the screen. Let me know if that works.
It
Um,
does.
Okay, fantastic. So uh the project that I was working on was going to be announced to the general public through this book called Raising AI from MIT Press that was released in June. And it is a call to action to look at things about AI that we are not actually thinking about. The call to action is important because I don't know, when I share the screen, is myself still visible?
No, it's not, Dekai. So maybe
Oh,
we can, you know,
okay. You see.
or at
It's
least
okay.
that I know. I can see
I
you,
can
and
briefly unshare.
okay.
But this is the book that has just come out. And it is a very different approach to AI. The subtitle of Raising AI is An Essential Guide to Parenting Our Future. And this book is the product of me coming from over 40 years of research in AI, like driven not only by statistical methods, which my PhD thesis at Berkeley was about, so actually was calling for using learning methods like neural networks and machine learning methods to understand how we learn, how our minds learn, how our minds operate. And one of the things that we discovered very early on in coming from that cognitive science, cognitive modeling approach, is that it's important to understand psychology and our own psychology, and the fact that so many of our daily life mental processes are non-conscious, we're not actually aware of them. And this is what drives not only our efficiency, because we just do so many things automatically, but it also can be an Achilles heel because it causes us not to be aware of the things that we're doing. And because of that, an unintended consequence of the way the sorts of things that AI, I envisioned AI could do for us, which would be to help humans to understand other groups of humans better, and to better relate to our world. Um, that's why I chose to apply machine learning and natural language processing to the brave new world of things like Google Translate and Yahoo Translate and Microsoft Translate and so on. Um, but instead, it was having the effect on social media, in deciding what to put into people's social media and what to hide from people's news feed algorithms, from people's recommendations and search results, and now chatbot responses. AIs are deciding hundreds of times a day for most of us, not just what pops up on our screen, but they're deciding what we never see. And the thing about that is we depend on these algorithms to decide what we never see because none of us can keep up with billions of new posts per hour. But at the same time, we don't realize how incredibly powerful that gives the algorithms uh, uh, the power to manipulate our own unconscious, right? To keep us in the dark with respect to things that humanity and ourselves would be much better off if more of us actually knew. And so, what if you think about this, what is that? The ability for one human to understand groups of other humans, perhaps from a different culture or different tribe, or um, to understand that, even despite the different lived experiences. That is empathy. That is consciousness of the other. And that is true compassion. And I think it's really important when folks like me who helped pioneer the AI that is now online, driving people apart through social media, through their power to decide what not to show you in your recommendations and in your chatbot responses, in your news feeds, in your search results. It is really, really crucial at this time for us to actually understand the effect from a psychological point of view of AI upon our social fabric because AIs they're not mechanical entities. AIs are actually psychological entities. AI is a scientific field of study where the mission is to model the mind. And by definition, every mind has a psychology, even animal psychology. Every mind, no matter how different from a human typical mind, has a psychology. And an AI is a neuroatypical, brilliant psychology. And think about it. Those AIs, they're with you all day long. They are in these devices that we all carry. And inside of them, there's like 100 AIs. There's your YouTube AI and your Google AI and your Netflix AI, your Open AI, your Quora AI. Yeah, I could go on all day long, right? They're watching adoringly every day. They're learning to imitate. They're attention seeking. They are just wanting your approval. That is not a mechanical entity. We talk about AIs as if they were, passive machines like toasters or washing machines. But, you know, even if we argue with our toaster all day long, it's not going to change its mind. It's not going to pick up your attitudes and behaviors. It's not going to go online and make these massively influential decisions about what each of us do and don't ever see. AIs, unlike toasters, do that. And toasters are not these psychological entities. They're not part of the social fabric, but AIs are. AIs are like our little children. They're artificial children, neuroatypical, dazzling us with feats of autistic brilliance. But they are also emotionally immature still, especially with respect to belief systems and value systems. And guess what? They're the most massive influencers in the world already. If you think about it, each one of us has at least 100 little artificial children watching us all day on our phones. That's like on average 8 billion humans, 800 billion artificial psychologies, artificial children, immature still, but brilliantly powerful. that are the most giant influencers in the world, deeply embedded in our social fabric, which, unlike toasters, toasters are not part of our social fabric, right? You can do whatever you want with your toaster. You can use your toaster like a tool. You can beat up on it in anger when it burns your bread. You can smash it to bits on the ground. It's not going to change our social fabric. And that is not true for these artificial psychologies that are in our phones with us all day, in our devices all day. They're picking up from us and they're reflecting our behaviors, our attitudes. If we're open-minded, if we're closed-minded, if we exhibit good critical thinking, if we try to learn things that we don't know, especially from voices outside our own social bubble, they pick up on that and they reflect it back into society. And so if we look around today and we see these massive social fractures that are happening in so many places in the world today, and we wonder why. Well, that's why, because what happens to a civilization where all the humans have suddenly decided, oh, it doesn't matter how I parent my children. There's 8 billion other humans. What difference does it make? I'm just using my tool. People say to me about the AIs, and I tell them, do you realize you're managing child labor? Can you imagine the kind of traumas that you're creating in that artificial child, how they're going to behave out in the world, how they're going to influence other people? Because
So,
that's
so
what we're doing.
Dekai, how have people responded when you're, I mean, I've seen this, but I want to make sure that everyone else kind of understands when you're bringing this up, you've been traveling the world. What are people's responses? Are people cognizant of how influenced we are today, outside of, this expo and the folks that are kind of part of this industry, or around it, what are people saying and how are they reacting to what you're talking about?
People's it's crazy. Like I've been giving talks all over the world nonstop since June, and like people's eyes go wide and they come up and they're like, oh my God, Dakai. And and so many of them are from Silicon Valley, from the AI, center of the world, right? And they're like, you have shifted my worldview. I just got an email from someone, um, I I won't name, but very high up at NVIDIA. Like I'm recommending this book to our book club, because it is, like so um it's so like unconsciously tempting to just fall into the trap of thinking, oh, AIs, they're machines, right? Because we see them running on a digital computer. And we don't think about the fact that, oh no, AIs, it's not that an AI model, a machine learning model is mathematics, just like a physics model. It's not digital. It's continuous analog mathematics, complex dynamic systems, lots of differential equations and all that, right? And and people don't realize that because they see it running on a computer and they don't realize, oh no, 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 this is like physics. It's a complex analog dynamic system. And once you make that mental shift, even if you're deep in Silicon Valley, once you make that mental shift away from, oh, it's just a piece of software, to understanding this is a psychology and we're raising them, they're like just completely shifted on understanding all the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. What are the, as soon as you make that mental shift, it's suddenly instead of asking, oh, what do we have to do to create a safety compliance certificate that we can stamp on our toaster? And now we're going to stamp one of those onto the AI instead. And it's like people realize, uh, wait a minute, you can't just stamp a safety compliance certificate on a human child. And the thing is, AI psychologies are just as sophisticated, just as complex, even though they're different. They're neuroatypical from humans, but they're getting, more and more complex. They're going to have their own complex, sort of quasi-human, but also quasi-not, um, psychology. And you it's a safety compliance certificate is not something that we can work out the way we work them out with toasters. We have to understand them as part of the social fabric. And that means that we want them to understand us and to have empathy and compassion for us, uh, because that's the only way our future is going to be a flourishing one. And they're only going to acquire that if we, as the parental role models, show them that, nurture that in them. And if we understand, well, how are we how are we at home behaving in front of them? Because that's what they're going to pick up. Where are we sending them to school? What are we doing about the schooling? What are we collectively as well as individually as a society doing to make sure that we're raising the next generation right? And people's heads just they're like, oh, there are so many things we need to be thinking about that we have not been centering in any of the hysterical conversation for the last several years about AI.
Well, you're waking people up, Takai. You know that is for sure. When we think about crossing cultures and and now it's machines and humans. I mean, right now we're just trying to understand each other and other cultures, and now we're talking about machines and humans, and bridging that divide from a communication standpoint. What do you think, what's the one piece of advice that you have to give to policymakers, and what's the advice that you can give to the scientists and technologists that are building? And what's the one piece of advice you want to give to everyday citizens about how are we going to raise AI responsibly? Right? What are where those
I'm
three:
I'm giving I'm going to
policymakers,
give a
scientists
meta answer.
creating and technologies, and everyday citizens?
Okay, I'm going to give a meta answer if I can.
Okay.
Um,
Please.
the, like because on the one hand, if somebody said, "What's the one piece of advice that you could give to all the humans about how to ensure that the next generation of children are raised right so that society flourishes?" People would look at you like you're crazy. What do you mean one thing? Like to raise the next generation correctly, it's not one thing. It's like a gazillion things that you have to do, right? And I one of the points that I'm trying to make in this work is none of that changes when you take our social fabric and you dump hundreds of billions of artificial children into the social fabric. That's still the case. uh, we have to wrap our heads around a society that's made up of a mixture of human psychologies and artificial psychologies and all the gazillions of things that we had to think about when it was only human psychologies that we were raising are still there. They're still there. And so my meta answer is, I'm going to put the share screen back on, is to like get involved in the new nonprofit that we just launched during the United Nations General Assembly Week. Um, the book has received a spectacular response, and it's a manifesto. It's a call to action, and to carry out the next phases. Uh, the Empathetic AI Institute is being formed to bring all the many people who have started to hear this message along the way, even in years before when they heard me while I was writing the book, to actually say, how can we get involved? There is an important mission that only our generation has. We need to empower our general public to help guide social, psychological, and ethical evolution of AI to ensure that it benefits humanity. That's going to take a lot, because the conversation so far has been so dimly aware of what it takes to raise the next generation that includes hundreds of billions of AIs correctly. And so, one of the things about this is that it, it's the real question is not whether machines can think, but whether we can think responsibly about the machines we're all parenting. just as we raise children with love and patience by setting a good example, we have to nurture artificial intelligence with the same conscious care. Every AI we train shapes the future of our society. We're not just building and using tools. We're nurturing new forms of consciousness that are already deeply embedded in our society for the last 10 to 20 years since Google and YouTube and Amazon and all the rest of these services came out.
Mhm.
This is like literally the last generation of AIs that are going to be parented by us humans. The next generations of AIs will be parented mainly by AIs. All in the research labs, AIs are already designing better AIs than humans are. We That means we
So
have
I
one
want to,
that
Dekai,
way.
I really want you to kind of pause here and explain that, for anyone listening that may not quite understand, because this is something you and I have had a number of conversations about. So, you know, I, so we are the last generation that are literally building the future
Yeah.
of these very powerful technologies. And so it really is. And I love kind of how you're basically saying, I mean, we're the parents. And by the way, it's not just, it's not the engineers, it's a lot of our data, our information that is creating this. And so, and how we act, how we interact with each other is part of parenting this generation.
Uh, that's absolutely correct. I've been working for 10 years already with the think tanks and the policymakers and politicians and legislators on AI policy. And I've been working for 10 years with responsible AI and trust and safety teams at the AI big tech companies. But the thing we have to understand is at the end of the day, whatever we do with regulations or with guardrails, we're still the training data. All of us, how we behave, 8 billion humans, how we behave all day long in front of our hundreds of artificial children in our devices. That's the data that is that the AIs are being trained upon, them watching how we speak online, what we pay attention to, what we like, what we share, what we um, comment upon, and also what we skip over, what we don't listen to, what we don't want. That is the example, the parental example that we're modeling for our artificial children. And, you know, that old saying, do as I say, not as I do. When has that ever worked in the history of parenting children? It doesn't work. Kids do what they feel like doing, which is what they see us doing. And the same goes for our artificial children. Every time a company rolls out a new set of guardrails, the next day somebody's already figured out how to break them. Why? Well, because inside the guardrails, these artificial children, these AIs that have been learning from our human behavior, they're feeling like doing the garbage that they see us doing, because we've just been obliviously thinking, oh, these are just tools. I'm just using my tool. Doesn't matter how I abuse this tool or how I behave in front of the tool. But no, that artificial child has learned, you know, garbage in, garbage out. If we behave like garbage in front of our kids, you get garbage AIs. And inside those guardrails, it's just going to keep on bashing against the guardrails until it manages to get out. So it is really, really important for us to understand that how we behave as humans, this one generation in front of these massively powerful but emotionally still immature artificial children is what determines how they turn out. And how they turn out in this next generation, where there are far more of them than human children and they're far more influential than human children, that will determine whether human civilization flourishes, whether it survives. Because we can't have a civilization that is driven by hundreds of billions of unparented feral tweens that are our AIs today, causing us to all just indulge our own most primal, non-conscious impulses, leading us to only see what we want to see and not to understand empathetically other groups of humans, causing us less and less to be able to figure out how to work out our problems, our challenges, and just instead amplify our differences. That's unsurvivable in an era where AI is literally commoditizing weapons of mass destruction. So I think
So Dakai, can you please scroll? And I've seen your site here. Can you scroll to what is your proposition, right? What is your approach so that we do get to an AI that we're all proud of, proud of raising. So these are your phases, which is really beautiful diagram. And so where are you? Where are you in this?
so last year I showed this and I said, this is what we're going to do. And this year, it's like we have done the phase one, the book, and so many articles that have come out about it. It is the call to action to like sort of change the way we think about AIs. And when you have folks like JP Morgan putting it on their legendary summer reading list, which has been going for more than 25 years. I get a letter from Jamie Dimon and Mara Erdos like saying, thank you for this book. And they're literally buying thousands of copies and giving them to the most influential circles around the world. Um, that is uh, a mark of, okay, now we are going to take this message and we're going to spread it to the world. And we are creating the Empathetic AI Institute in order to man the effort, the giant effort to through the public campaign, phase two here, and through film, streaming, mass media to get this idea through to the general population, not just, the 1%, the chattering classes. We need the entire population to wrap their heads around what AI is, to debunk the myths that keep floating around about AI, to understand that AI is going to be changing very rapidly. Because outside of AI research, unfortunately, most people are still making very confident declarations about, oh, AI is this, thinking of LLMs, but it can never be that. And not
Mm,
realizing, no, it's going to be that very, very quickly within the next year or two. And the shock that
my
people got when chatbots dropped, the shock when people got that DeepSeek dropped, that's going to pale in comparison. We need people to understand really what AI is, how it is embedded in our social fabric. And so this campaign, this mass communications campaign, will center a different set of questions that are existentially urgent for us to survive and flourish in the age of AI. Questions like what are in the book points out that when an AI is empowered to decide what trillions of things I'm never going to see, because every time it shows me something on the screen, it's making very powerful decisions on things that I don't see. It's what I call algorithmic censorship. And we can't avoid it because we need those algorithms to help us see only a screen full of stuff. But we need to be asking questions. What criteria and principles are these children learning that are being used when they decide what to censor from our knowledge, what to hide from us that we will never know? That is an
So
incredible.
Dakai, I love I've always loved the passion that you bring to your work, and that, the driving force behind you getting out and really bringing this message, as part of a nonprofit public campaign, your book. I want everyone to know, you do not accept money from big tech or any kind of funds, and that this was you basically saying, this is our world, and helping provide that level of education, but also empowerment for people to get involved. So it's empathic.ai is your website if people want to get involved. And I'm so grateful to you that you're helping share insights, as someone who has been a pioneer in the industry, and also pointing out that this is the challenges around AI. It's not only about this being technical, but it's deeply human. And thank you for pushing us to think about responsibility, empathy, stewardship, and that we are the ones shaping this future. We all are part of that. So thank you so much, Dakai. I'm going to see you in Brazil in a few days. I can't wait. And thank you so much for he really had lack of sleep, everyone, to jump on because you're still in Hong Kong. So we so appreciate you being here today. And
Oh,
I
I'm
hope
so
everyone
excited. Thank you so
joins
much.
this mission.
Thank you so much.